Everything you resist persists. Carl Jung said this decades ago, but if you're watching this video right now, chances are you're living proof of this truth. You feel stuck. You feel like no matter what you do, no matter how hard you try, the same patterns keep showing up in your life. The same toxic relationships, the same self-sabotage, the same feeling that something invisible is pulling the strings of your existence, and you're just a puppet dancing to a tune you never chose to. Here, let me ask you something, and I want you to be brutally honest with yourself. When was the last time you felt truly free? Not the kind of freedom where you can go wherever you want or buy whatever you want, but the deep, soul-level freedom where you're not constantly fighting against invisible forces that seem to control your every decision. If you can't remember, or if that question made your chest tighten just a little bit, then what I'm about to share with you might be the most important thing you hear today. There's a trauma you're denying. There's a wound you're pretending doesn't exist. And that denial, that resistance, is the very thing that's been controlling your life from the shadows. I know this might sound harsh, but sometimes the truth cuts deep before it sets you free. You see, most people think trauma has to be something dramatic, something obvious. They think it has to be abuse or neglect or some catastrophic event. But the truth is, some of the most powerful traumas are the quiet ones, the subtle ones, the ones that whisper rather than scream. Maybe it was the way your parent looked at you with disappointment when you didn't meet their expectations. Maybe it was being ignored when you needed attention most. Maybe it was being told you were too sensitive, too emotional, too much. These moments, these seemingly small experiences, they carved neural pathways in your brain. They created programs that are still running in the background of your consciousness, dictating how you show up in relationships, how you pursue your dreams, how you see yourself in the mirror every morning. Tell me in the comments right now, do you feel like something invisible is sabotaging your plans? Do you feel like you're your own worst enemy sometimes? Because if you do, you're not alone. Thousands of people watching this video right now are nodding their heads, recognizing themselves in these words. And that recognition, that moment of seeing yourself clearly, that's the first step toward freedom. Jung understood something that most of us spend our entire lives avoiding. He understood that the very thing we push away, the very emotion we refuse to feel, the very truth we refuse to acknowledge becomes the master of our fate. When you deny your anger, it controls you through passive aggression. When you deny your sadness, it controls you through depression. When you deny your fear, it controls you through anxiety. The emotion doesn't disappear just because you refuse to acknowledge it. Instead, it goes underground, and from there it runs your life like a puppet master, pulling strings you can't even see. I want you to think about your life right now. Think about the patterns that keep repeating. Think about the relationships that always seem to end the same way. Think about the dreams you keep putting off, the goals you keep sabotaging just when you're about to achieve them. Think about the voice in your head that tells you you're not good enough, not smart enough, not worthy enough. Where do you think that voice comes from? It's not your voice. It's the voice of your unhealed trauma, speaking through the mask of your own thoughts. But here's what most people don't understand about trauma. It's not just about what happened to you. It's about what didn't happen for you. It's about the love you didn't receive, the validation you didn't get, the safety you didn't feel. It's about all the times you had to shut down parts of yourself just to survive, just to be accepted, just to belong. And those shut down parts, those rejected aspects of your being, they don't just disappear. They become your shadow. And from the shadow, they control your life in ways you can't even imagine. You know what's fascinating? The very thing you're most ashamed of, the very thing you're most afraid people will discover about you, that's often your greatest source of power. But you'll never access that power as long as you keep running from it. You'll never heal what you won't feel. You'll never integrate what you refuse to acknowledge. And you'll never be free as long as you're at war with parts of yourself. This is why nothing changes. This is why you can read all the self-help books, attend all the seminars, try all the techniques, and still find yourself stuck in the same patterns, because you're trying to change the symptoms without addressing the cause. You're trying to redecorate the house while the foundation is cracking. You're trying to plant flowers in poisoned soil and wondering why nothing grows. If you've ever asked yourself, why do I keep attracting the same type of people? Why do I keep making the same mistakes? Why do I feel like I'm living someone else's life? Then you're asking the right questions. But the answers aren't going to come from outside. They're not going to come from another person, another job, another relationship, another city. The answers are inside you, buried beneath layers of denial, protected by walls of resistance, hidden in the very places you're most afraid to look. Jung had a profound insight that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. He said that what you most deny in yourself has the greatest power over you. Think about that for a moment. The very thing you're trying to hide, the very emotion you're trying to suppress, the very aspect of yourself you're most ashamed of, that's the thing that's actually running your life from behind the scenes. Let me give you a real example. Maybe you pride yourself on being nice, on being agreeable, on never causing conflict. You tell yourself and others that you don't have an angry bone in your body. But what happens when someone treats you unfairly? What happens when someone crosses your boundaries? What happens when someone takes advantage of your kindness? Instead of expressing healthy anger, instead of standing up for yourself directly, you become passive-aggressive. You give the silent treatment. You make subtle digs. You withdraw your energy. You punish people in ways they can't even identify. And you do it all while maintaining your image as the nice person. This is your denied anger controlling you. This is what Jung meant when he said that what you resist persists. Your anger didn't disappear just because you decided you weren't an angry person. It went underground, and from there, it's been sabotaging your relationships, your self-respect, and your ability to create healthy boundaries. People can feel your hidden resentment even when you're smiling. They can sense the iciness beneath your politeness, and they respond to what they feel, not what you say. I want you to reflect on this right now. What emotion do you most avoid? What part of yourself do you most deny? Drop a comment and let me know, because acknowledging this is the first step toward freedom. Most of you watching this video right now are probably realizing that you've been carrying around emotions you've never fully felt, aspects of yourself you've never fully accepted. But here's the thing about emotions that Jung understood, and that most people miss completely. Your emotions aren't your enemies. They're messengers. They're trying to tell you something important about your inner world, about your needs, about your boundaries, about your values. When you suppress them, when you deny them, when you judge them as bad or wrong or inappropriate, you're essentially shooting the messenger and then wondering why you keep getting the same message. Let's talk about anxiety, because I know so many of you struggle with this. You treat your anxiety like it's a disease, like it's something wrong with you that needs to be fixed or medicated away. But what if your anxiety is actually trying to protect you? What if it's the part of you that learned very early in life that the world isn't safe, that people can't be trusted, that you have to be hyper-vigilant just to survive? What if your anxiety is actually a trauma response that's been trying to keep you safe all these years? Maybe you were raised by parents who were emotionally unpredictable. One moment they were loving, the next moment they were critical or angry or absent. Your nervous system learned to be on high alert, scanning for signs of danger, trying to predict and prevent the next emotional storm. That hypervigilance served you then. It helped you navigate an unstable environment. But now, decades later, that same hypervigilance is creating anxiety in situations that are actually safe. Your anxiety isn't the problem. Your anxiety is pointing to the problem. It's saying, hey, there's an old wound here that needs attention. There's a part of you that still feels like that scared child who had to walk on eggshells, who had to be perfect to earn love, who had to take care of everyone else's emotions while ignoring your own. Your anxiety is asking you to finally give that scared part of yourself the attention and healing it's been crying out for all these years. But instead of listening to the message, most people just try to silence the messenger. They take medication. They use alcohol, they stay busy, they scroll through social media, they do anything and everything to avoid feeling what they're feeling. And while these strategies might provide temporary relief, they don't address the root cause. They don't heal the original wound. They just put a band-aid on a gaping wound and hope it doesn't get infected. Take a moment right now and ask yourself what symptom has been showing up in your life. Is it anxiety? Is it depression? Is it insomnia? Is it chronic pain? Is it relationship problems? Is it an inability to commit? Is it self-sabotage? Whatever it is, I want you to try something different. Instead of seeing it as something wrong with you, try seeing it as something that's trying to get your attention. Try asking it what it's trying to tell you. Try listening to the message instead of shooting the messenger. Jung believed that our symptoms are often our psyche's way of trying to restore balance. If you're constantly anxious, maybe it's because you've been ignoring your need for safety and security. If you're chronically depressed, maybe it's because you've been disconnected from your authentic self for so long that your soul is grieving. If you keep sabotaging your success, maybe it's because you have an unconscious belief that you don't deserve good things, a belief that was planted in childhood and has been running your life ever since. Here's what I want you to do right now. Think of an emotional symptom or pattern that keeps showing up in your life. Now, instead of judging it or trying to fix it, I want you to get curious about it. What is this symptom trying to protect you from? What is it trying to tell you about your unmet needs? What old wound might it be pointing to? Share your insights in the comments, because I guarantee that your willingness to look at your symptoms differently will inspire others to do the same. The truth is, most of us have been trained to see emotions as inconveniences, as weaknesses, as things to be overcome rather than understood. We live in a culture that values productivity over presence, achievement over authenticity, success over soul. We've been taught to push through, to get over it, to move on, to stay positive. But what if this approach is actually what's keeping us stuck? What if our refusal to feel is what's keeping us from healing? Jung had another revolutionary insight that completely transforms how we understand our deepest pain. He said that the wound that you hide is also your greatest gift. Now, I know that might sound impossible right now, especially if you're in the middle of struggling with something that feels like pure suffering. But stay with me, because this understanding could change everything about how you see yourself and your life purpose. Think about the people who have impacted your life the most. Think about the teachers, the healers, the friends, the mentors who really understood you on a deep level. I guarantee that most of them had walked through their own version of the pain you were experiencing. The therapist who helped you heal from abandonment issues probably knows what abandonment feels like in their bones. The friend who held space for your grief probably had their heart broken wide open at some point. The coach who helped you build confidence probably struggled with self-worth for years. This isn't a coincidence. This is how transformation works. Your deepest wounds, when fully felt and integrated, become your greatest sources of wisdom, compassion, and healing power. The very thing that almost destroyed you can become the very thing that allows you to help others rebuild their lives. But this transformation only happens when you stop running from your pain and start learning from it. Let me share something with you. Maybe you've always felt different, like you don't quite fit in anywhere. Maybe you've always been more sensitive than others, feeling everything more deeply, picking up on energies and emotions that others seem oblivious to. Maybe you were told you were too much, too intense, too emotional. Maybe you learned to tone yourself down, to dim your light, to make yourself smaller, just to be accepted. If this resonates with you, I want you to consider something radical. What if your sensitivity isn't a weakness? What if your ability to feel deeply isn't something to be ashamed of? What if the very thing that made you feel like an outsider is actually your superpower? What if your capacity to feel pain also gives you an extraordinary capacity to feel joy, love, and connection? What if your emotional intensity is actually a gift that allows you to help others process emotions they can't even identify? You see, the people who have been through the deepest darkness often become the brightest lights. The people who have felt the most pain often develop the most compassion. The people who have been broken often become the most skilled at helping others put the pieces back together. But this transformation requires something that most people are unwilling to do. It requires you to stop seeing your pain as a mistake and start seeing it as a teacher. I want you to think about your biggest struggle right now. Maybe it's loneliness. Maybe it's anxiety. Maybe it's addiction. Maybe it's a pattern of toxic relationships. Maybe it's chronic illness. Maybe it's financial instability. Now, I want you to ask yourself a different question. How has this struggle taught you about human nature? How has it developed your empathy? How has it given you insights that people who haven't walked this path could never understand? If you've struggled with loneliness, you probably understand the human need for connection in ways that naturally social people never will. If you've battled anxiety, you probably have developed coping strategies and self-awareness that could help millions of other anxious people. If you've overcome addiction, you understand the human capacity for both destruction and redemption in ways that could save lives. If you've survived toxic relationships, you probably have insights about boundaries and self-worth that could help others escape similar patterns. The question isn't whether your pain has value. The question is whether you're willing to find that value, to honor it, to let it transform you instead of define you. Most people spend their entire lives trying to get rid of their pain, trying to pretend it never happened, trying to return to some imaginary state of innocence they think they lost. But Jung understood something profound. You can't go back. You can only go through. And when you go through consciously, when you face your pain with courage and curiosity instead of resistance and denial, something magical happens. Your pain becomes your power. But here's the catch. This transformation doesn't happen automatically. It doesn't happen just because you've suffered. Suffering alone doesn't create wisdom. Suffering plus consciousness creates wisdom. Suffering plus reflection creates growth. Suffering plus integration creates healing. You have to be willing to sit with your pain, to feel it fully, to ask it what it's trying to teach you, to extract the lessons and the gifts it carries. Tell me in the comments, how has your greatest difficulty taught you something valuable? How has your deepest pain developed a strength or insight that you wouldn't have otherwise? Because I know that as you start to see your struggles differently, as you start to honor the wisdom they've brought you, something shifts. The story changes from I'm damaged to I'm experienced. The narrative changes from I'm broken to I'm breaking open. The identity changes from victim to healer. This is what Jung meant when he talked about the wounded healer archetype. The healer who has never been wounded can offer techniques and strategies, but they can't offer true understanding. They can give you a map, but they can't walk beside you through the territory because they've never been there themselves. But the wounded healer, the person who has walked through the fire and emerged transformed, they can offer something infinitely more valuable. They can offer hope, they can offer proof that transformation is possible. They can offer the deep knowing that comes only from lived experience. Right now, as you're listening to this, you might be thinking, but my pain doesn't feel like a gift. It feels like a curse, and I understand that. When you're in the middle of the storm, it's hard to see the rainbow. When you're in the depths of the valley, it's hard to imagine the mountaintop. But pain is not the end of your story. Pain is often the beginning of your real story. The story of who you become when you stop being a victim of your circumstances and start being a student of your experience. Now we come to perhaps Jung's most challenging but liberating insight. He said that there is no healing, no wholeness, no true freedom without integrating your shadow. Your shadow is everything about yourself that you've decided is unacceptable, everything you've pushed away, denied, or projected onto others. And until you reclaim these rejected parts of yourself, you'll remain fragmented, incomplete, and unconsciously controlled by the very things you're trying to avoid. Most people spend their entire lives building an identity around who they think they should be, who they think others want them to be, who they think is acceptable and lovable. They create what Jung called the persona, a mask they wear to navigate the world. But in creating this mask, they inevitably create a shadow. Everything that doesn't fit the persona gets pushed into the darkness, but it doesn't disappear. It lives in the shadow, and from there it influences every decision, every relationship, every choice in ways you can't even see. Let me give you a powerful example. Maybe you've built your identity around being the good person, the helper, the one who always puts others first. You pride yourself on your generosity, your kindness, your selflessness. But what happens when someone doesn't appreciate your help? What happens when someone questions your motives? What happens when someone doesn't reciprocate your kindness? Suddenly you find yourself feeling resentful, bitter, even vengeful. You think these feelings with shock and horror because they don't fit your self-image. So you push them away, deny them, judge them as bad or wrong. But here's what's really happening. Your shadow contains not just your capacity for selfishness, but also your capacity for healthy boundaries, for saying no, for prioritizing your own needs. In rejecting your shadow, you've also rejected these essential aspects of selfhood. So you end up giving compulsively, not from genuine love, but from an unconscious need to maintain your identity as the good person. You become a martyr, and martyrs always expect something in return, even if they won't admit it to themselves. This is why your relationships feel inauthentic. This is why people sometimes feel manipulated by your kindness, even though you genuinely believe you have good intentions. This is why you attract people who take advantage of your generosity. You're not showing up as a whole person. You're showing up as half a person, and that half is unconsciously trying to control and manipulate the world to validate its existence. The shadow contains not just your so-called negative qualities, but also your power, your sexuality, your anger, your ambition, your wildness, your creativity. If you've been taught that anger is bad, your shadow contains not just your destructive rage, but also your healthy assertiveness, your ability to protect yourself and others, your passion for justice. If you've been taught that sexuality is shameful, your shadow contains not just your unhealthy sexual impulses, but also your life force, your creative energy, your capacity for intimate connection. When you reject these parts of yourself, you don't just lose access to the problematic aspects, you lose access to the gifts they contain. You become a diminished version of yourself, operating at a fraction of your potential, unconsciously seeking wholeness through other people, through achievements, through anything outside yourself that might make you feel complete. But shadow. Integration isn't about becoming a selfish, angry, sexually inappropriate person. It's about becoming whole. It's about acknowledging that you contain multitudes, that you're capable of both great love and great selfishness, both profound wisdom and devastating foolishness, both healing and harm. It's about accepting your full humanity instead of trying to be a perfect, one-dimensional version of yourself. Here's a practical way to start this integration. Think about the people who trigger you most. Think about the people whose behavior makes you feel disgusted, angry, or superior. Now ask yourself this uncomfortable question. What quality in them am I most judging? Is it their selfishness, their neediness, their arrogance, their laziness, their intensity? Whatever it is, there's a very good chance that you're seeing your own shadow reflected back to you. Jung said that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The things we judge most harshly in others are often the things we judge most harshly in ourselves. The person whose neediness disgusts you might be reflecting your own unmet needs that you've been too proud to acknowledge. The person whose arrogance triggers you might be reflecting your own suppressed confidence that you've been too afraid to express. This doesn't mean that everyone who irritates you is just a projection of your shadow. Sometimes people genuinely behave in harmful ways. But if you find yourself having a particularly strong emotional reaction to someone, if you find yourself thinking about them obsessively, if you find yourself talking about them repeatedly, there's probably some shadow work to be done. Right. Now I want you to think about someone who really gets under your skin. What quality in them bothers you most? Now, with complete honesty, ask yourself where that quality might exist in you. Maybe it's buried deep. Maybe it's disguised. Maybe it's expressed in a different way, but see if you can find it. And instead of judging yourself for having this quality, try to get curious about it. What need might it be trying to meet? What wound might it be trying to protect? What gift might it be trying to express? This is the beginning of shadow integration. It's not about becoming your shadow. It's about making the unconscious conscious. It's about bringing the rejected parts of yourself back into the light where they can be transformed, rather than leaving them in the darkness where they control. When you integrate your shadow, you don't become a worse person. You become a more authentic person. You become someone who can love from choice rather than compulsion, someone who can help from strength rather than weakness, someone who can show up as a whole human being rather than a carefully constructed persona. The goal isn't to eliminate your shadow. The goal is to have a conscious relationship with it, to know when it's driving the bus, and to make conscious choices about how to express these energies in healthy ways. This is what true maturity looks like. This is what real freedom feels like. So here we are, at the end of this journey through the landscape of your unconscious mind, and I want to leave you with the most important truth of all. The trauma you've been denying, the emotions you've been suppressing, the shadow you've been rejecting. They're not your enemies. They're not obstacles to overcome or problems to solve. They're parts of yourself that have been waiting in the darkness for you to turn toward them with compassion, with curiosity, with the courage to finally see them as they truly are. Jung spent his entire life studying the human psyche, and his final conclusion was both simple and profound. Your vision will become clear when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens. Everything you've been seeking outside yourself, all the validation, all the love, all the sense of wholeness and completion, it's been inside you all along, waiting for you to stop running and start integrating. But integration isn't a destination. It's not something you achieve once and then you're done. It's a lifelong practice of turning toward yourself with compassion instead of criticism, with curiosity instead of judgment, with acceptance instead of resistance. It's the practice of meeting each part of yourself, even the parts you don't like, with the same unconditional love you would offer to a frightened child. Let me give you 3 practical steps you can start taking today to begin this integration process. First, start noticing your patterns without trying to change them immediately. When you find yourself reacting in a familiar way, when you notice yourself falling into an old story, when you catch yourself projecting your own issues onto someone else, just notice. Don't judge. Don't try to fix. Just observe with the gentle curiosity of a scientist studying something fascinating. What's happening here? What old wound might be getting triggered? What unmet need might be trying to express itself? Second, start practicing emotional honesty. When someone asks you how you're doing, try giving a real answer instead of an automatic, "Fine." When you feel angry, sad, scared, or lonely, try acknowledging these feelings to yourself instead of immediately trying to fix them or make them go away. Create space for your emotions to exist without having to do anything about them. Remember, you can't heal what you won't feel, and you can't integrate what you refuse to acknowledge. Third, start seeking support for this inner work. Find a therapist, a support group, a trusted friend, or a spiritual community where you can safely explore these deeper parts of yourself. Shadow work and trauma integration aren't meant to be done alone. We need witnesses, we need mirrors. We need people who can hold space for our healing journey without trying to fix us or rush us through the process. But most importantly, start treating yourself with the same compassion you would offer to your best friend. Notice how you talk to yourself in your head. Notice the harsh criticism, the impossible standards, the constant self-judgment. And then ask yourself, would I talk to someone I love this way? Would I treat a friend the way I'm treating myself right now? If the answer is no, then it's time to learn a new way of being with yourself. This work isn't easy. It requires courage to look at parts of yourself you've been trained to reject. It requires patience to sit with uncomfortable emotions you've been trained to avoid. It requires compassion to embrace aspects of your humanity you've been trained to judge. But this is the path to freedom. This is the path to wholeness. This is the path to becoming who you really are instead of who you think you should be. As you begin this journey, remember that healing isn't linear. There will be days when you feel like you're making progress, and days when you feel like you're going backward. There will be moments of profound insight and moments of utter confusion. There will be times when you feel incredibly brave and times when you feel like hiding under the covers. All of this is normal. All of this is part of the process. All of this is perfect. The trauma that you've been denying doesn't have to control your life anymore. The emotions you've been suppressing don't have to drive your decisions from the shadows anymore. The parts of yourself you've been rejecting don't have to sabotage your happiness anymore. But the choice is yours. You can keep running, keep avoiding, keep pretending that everything is fine, while your unconscious mind continues to pull the strings of your life. Or you can turn toward yourself with courage and compassion and begin the most important work you'll ever do. I want to hear from you. What resonated most deeply with you in this video? What patterns are you ready to look at more honestly? What parts of yourself are you ready to welcome home? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because your courage to be vulnerable might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to begin their own healing journey. If this video opened something up for you, if it made you feel less alone in your Struggles, if it gave you hope that change is possible, please subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell. We're building a community of people who are committed to doing the inner work, who understand that true transformation happens from the inside out, who are willing to support each other on this journey of becoming whole. Remember, you are not broken. You are not damaged. You are not too much or not enough. You are a human being having a human experience, and that experience includes both light and shadow, both joy and pain, both wisdom and confusion. The goal isn't to eliminate the difficult parts of your humanity. The goal is to embrace all of it, to integrate all of it, to love all of it. Because when you can love yourself completely, when you can accept yourself fully, when you can embrace your whole story, including the chapters you wish you could rewrite, that's when real healing begins. That's when real freedom starts. That's when you finally come home to yourself.